Environmentalist, activist and, of course, Springwatch star Chris Packham has long been at the forefront of climate activism. He openly champions and openly encourages disruptive eco-warriors such as Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion.
You know that carbon dioxide is a very potent greenhouse gas. Has the capacity.
Well, this is from his new BBC series Earth, and Chris Packham hopes to follow in their footsteps by inspiring fear about climate change, hoping it will wake people up to the climate crisis. Chris joins us now from Southampton. Very good morning to you, Chris.
Morning, Chris.
A lot of people say there's a lot of scaremongering about the climate, that this kind of apocalyptic language about future generations is simply frightening people, including our children. But do you back that kind of language? Because the new series, I watched the first episode of it, it's very dramatic and it talks about extinction events. Are you adding to scaremongering, or is it a necessary tactic?
Well, we're presenting the science in our new 5-part Earth series. It's a biography of our planet, and we're picking the highlights, if you like, throughout the course of its life to date. And one of the things that we see is that our climate has changed radically over that period. Now, we're talking about 4.5 billion years, of course, but even in recent times, we've seen that climate changing and precipitating mass extinction events. And tonight's programme, 9 o'clock, BBC 2, is all about one of those, the Permian extinction, where 90% of life on Earth disappeared. So we know, historically and scientifically proven, that when our climate tips and shifts into different ranges of temperatures, other factors as well, it has a considerable impact on life on Earth. Now, the changes that we're talking about in our Earth programme happened over millions of years. We've caused the changes that we're seeing now in the last 150, 200 years. So yes, there is a scare factor involved here, and we are, to some extent, I think, sleepwalking towards an apocalypse, as you say. But what we've got to equally say to people is that we have a choice. You know, we're not disempowering people by frightening them. We're saying wake up and act, because we can still avert complete catastrophe.
Well, obviously, we have to talk about these things and debate them openly. I want to ask you about the tactics that are used by groups like Just Stop Oil, who you've supported for a long time now. I'm a bit confused, and you may well have been misquoted, so let's get it clear here on Good Morning Britain. I read that you now think that their tactics of showering things with orange powder and paint and walking very slowly and disrupting traffic and trying to stop the London rush hour today and for the rest of the week, you now think are counterproductive. Is that true?
No, it isn't. I'm afraid that was a misquote from the Daily Fail, I imagine. As long as these people are acting peacefully and no one is being harmed, then I think that, you know, they're precipitating conversations like the one that we're having now. And what these people and all of us are asking, in fact, is a transition away from the exploitation and exploration for further use of fossil fuels. And there's no ambiguity about the fact that that's where we need to go. You know, the UN are telling us that. The government's own Climate Change Committee have published a report which is telling us that this is an extremely urgent move to make. So as long as they're peaceful and precipitating conversations like ours, keeping it in the forefront of media, which is very, very difficult to do because there's so much competition for airtime, as you well know, then I think those tactics are valid. And after all, even when they're disrupting, you know, games of tennis, just a game, I might add, no damage was done to the court, no damage was done to anything else. And in London, let's be very clear, I've been filming these protests for some time. Ambulances always let through, public transport always let through, cooperation with the police always, when I've seen it, it is very good-natured. So this is an important conversation, and at this point in time, no one else is raising it.
But are these protests aimed at the right target, Chris? Because in this country, we've pretty much eliminated coal-fired energy from our energy supply mix. We're investing squillions in wind power. If Labour win the next election, they're going to be spending even more on wind farms. Our CO2 emissions, my general agreement, are now per capita at the lowest in the UK since the mid-1850s. But China is burning more and more coal, and next year China will burn more coal to produce power than every other country in the world put together. Why isn't Just Stop Oil, instead of, in a sense, preaching to the converted, because we get it, why aren't they demonstrating outside the Chinese embassy?
2 points there. Firstly, I think you're wrong with respect about what's the achievements that we're seeing in the UK. The Climate Change Committee have said we're not meeting any of our targets. We're talking about opening a new coal mine in Cumbria, and we're still granting licences to explore for more oil and gas. Second point, valid question. Are they targeting the right people? And that's a question that I'm asking them for a forthcoming documentary that I'm making for Channel 4. If the tactics aren't working, do we need to change the tactics? And I think you're right. That's a valid question that any protesters should be constantly asking themselves.
Because you did say in the, well, you call it something different, but in the Daily Mail, we've been protesting about the climate for some time and things have got worse. So, I mean, that's where the argument has come from, that if the tactics and the protests aren't working and things are getting worse, you surely need to suggest that there would be a change in tactics. I mean, you say that ambulances get through, but if somebody has in their car someone who needs to get to hospital, of course, they don't have a blue light. They're not necessarily going to get through. It's one of the reasons that people get panicky about the go-slows. If someone's trying to get to work because they need to earn themselves a living, there's a cost of living crisis, they feel frustrated and targeted. It's not for those individual drivers to change government policy, is it?
These disruptions are an inconvenience, there's no question about that, and there is a scale of inconvenience, and I appreciate that too. Being late for work is very different from being late to a hospital appointment. Can we just get some perspective and contrast those inconveniences with those that we're seeing in Canada at the moment? It's on fire. Can we contrast that with what's been happening in Southern Europe over the weekend? People being told to stay indoors because there's a threat to their lives through
Chris,
extreme
honestly,
temperatures.
we were reporting on that this morning. In fact, we're about to go to Laura,
Yeah,
and
indeed.
as you know, she does report on that. The point is that the drivers of these cars are not directly responsible for policy, and you, by your own acknowledgement, have suggested that government, stated, government policy is going backwards. We've just spoken to the Labour Party. They've already U-turned on one of their green pledges. How are these tactics, targeting those drivers and causing an inconvenience, having a positive effect on policy?
They've given me and you a platform this morning to talk about the most critical issue in our planet's history and our species' history, as outlined in the programme which starts tonight on BBC Two at 9 o'clock.
OK.
A five-parter about the biography of our beautiful planet, the one planet that we know of in the universe that's got life on, and we are a remarkable species. We're adaptable, we're intelligent, we're creative, we're imaginative. At this point, we need to really pull it off to make sure that we look after ourselves into the future and we have a healthy, sustainable world for our children. And that's why it's important we have these conversations, and we're having it paradoxically because of Just Stop Oil.
Well, Chris, one last very brief quote I want to read to you. This isn't from the Daily Mail, it's from another national newspaper, and it's typical of what most of the papers say on their editorials. It's this. This is the last weekend. Talking about Just Stop Oil protesters, quote, "They are driven by an arrogant and false belief that they alone care about the environment, while the people affected by their protests must be cured of their complacency and ignorance." That's at the nub of it, isn't it? They're alienating people who otherwise support the argument.
I've met the protesters, and I can give you my categorical assurance that they are not arrogant people that believe that everyone else are simply fools to be jammed in traffic. That is certainly not the case. They are scared. They're the canaries in the coal mine, and at some point in the future there will be statues of them in Parliament Square, as there are statues of the suffragettes. That, I believe, is the truth. But as I say, if you want to know why we are so concerned at this point in time about the health and well-being of our planet, then tune in at 9 o'clock to BBC Two for our Earth series. Because I've got to tell you, Susanna, Richard, this is such a marvellous planet. And what our series shows is that we are extraordinarily fortunate to be here as a species.
Yes.
But this place is very, very fragile. Its history shows that the tiniest little tipping points can throw it into chaos that will last for millions of years.
All right, Chris.
Now, I'm not saying that that's what might happen now, but I am saying that we really need to look after this place. Yes. Look at it. Look. I mean, do we want to lose this? I don't think so.
You make the point lyrically. Chris, thank you very much. And I have to tell you, from the clips that I've seen, I'm really looking forward to your series, Earth. As you say, it's on at 9 o'clock tonight. I'll be going to bed early, but I will be taping it and I'll be watching it.
Chris Packham, thank you very much indeed.